Hi, fifth graders. We're going to continue today with our lessons on the steps of the Passover Seder. My goal is to add something new in for you here and there, hopefully, things you haven't learned yet. But like yesterday, I'm slowing down, taking a deep breath, and not rushing through it. So we got through the end of the section called Magid yesterday. And right after that, we have Rochza. Now, I will tell you that as I've lived in different places, people have pronounced this in different ways. I grew up saying Rachtsa, but I didn't know about the Kamatz Katan then. I hadn't learned about it yet. And you usually see that there's a Kamatz under the Resh. And if there's a Kamatz there, it would be, because of the grammar involved, Rochtsa. Now, I've also seen it spelled Rachatsa. So there's different ways, and I'm not sure how people usually pronounce it at Pressman Academy. I did send an email to one of the big authorities in the Israel National Library, and her guess is that her thinking is that it's probably Rochza, but there's a lot of traditions, and that's okay. So I thought we would talk about why do we do Netilat Yadayim ever? And I like to explain it this way. When the temple was destroyed and we no longer had a place for sacrifices, the entire Jewish religion needed to change at that point. We no longer had the place that was the central place that we did our rituals and came to be close to God. The rabbis of that time had to almost reinvent Judaism in many ways to make it a religion that could survive in spite of the fact that the temple was gone. So they decided to change the emphasis. Instead of it being a central focus on the temple, they decided that many of our rituals would be done at home, but they would remind us of the temple. So they said that the new symbols were, instead of having a temple, our equivalent was our house was like the temple. We no longer had jobs for Kohanim. So in our house, the priests are us. There's no altar for sacrificing. So the equivalent in our home is our table. There's no priest washing before a sacrifice. We wash. That's why we do Netilat Yadayim. And it goes further. Just like salt was put on the sacrifice, salt is put on our bread at the table, at the table that represents our altar. And the sacrifice is our meal. So you can see that a lot of the steps and things that we do, the hand washing, the salt that you may have seen people when they say hamotzi putting salt on their bread, it's all to take the level of what we do in our homes and raise it to a higher spiritual level in order to remind us of the temple. So that's why we do Netilat Yadayim, to make our homes our temples. Now, after everybody, this time when they do wash hands, it's with a bracha, because we only say a bracha on it when we're going right into hamotzi. And here we are. We're moving right on to motzi matzah. Now it's interesting. There's two parts. There's motzi and there's matzah. So we have two blessings here. One of them is for the mitzvah of eating matzah. And it ends with Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav Vitzivanu al achilat matzah. If you look closely in those words, you'll know that this is a bracha that's said before a mitzvah, because look at it, it says b'mitzvotav and vitzivanu, which both have the shoresh sadi vav he. So this is the bracha that we say because it's a mitzvah to eat matzah, but we still say hamotzi lechem min haaretz, because anytime we're eating something that is bread, and matzah is considered bread when it comes to matzot, It's called lechem oni, the bread of affliction. We always say hamotzi. And now that we know that our homes are our temples, don't forget you've got to sprinkle some salt on. Now we're moving on to the maror. The word mar inside of the word maror means bitter, and we're told in the story in Exodus, we are told that the Egypts embittered the lives of the slaves. Now, depending on where your family comes from or came from originally, there are different traditions of what foods might be the bitter food. We often see horseradish around here, and horseradish is very strong. A lot of people don't like it, but that's the purpose of it. I've come across many people who've been mystified why there's a place on their Seder plate for romaine lettuce with the word chazeret on it. And that's because many people have the tradition of using a piece of romaine lettuce as a kind of maror at their table. Now, when I eat romaine lettuce, it doesn't taste very bitter to me. However, I can imagine that over time, perhaps some of the bitterness has been bred out of our lettuce to make it seem more tasty to us because other kinds of greens still have a bitter taste to them. Now, the last thing I want you to know about maror is the reason we have the charoset, which reminds us of the clay or the mortar that was used in building with the clay, that the charoset is actually, eating the charoset is part of the mitzvah of eating the maror. That's why we don't have a bracha on the charoset. The charoset is really part of eating maror. So when we eat the maror, it's traditional to dip your maror, if you have a piece of it, into the charoset. You'll even remember that when we say the manishtana, we ask, on other nights we don't dip our food at all. On this night we dip twice. Well, people usually think of the first dipping, which is when you dip the green vegetable into the salt water. The second dipping of the night is when we dip the maror in the charoset. Now that's very hard to do if you have ground up charoset, maror. We like to buy the root itself and dip a piece in there, or you can take the romaine lettuce as the chazeret, as your maror, and dip that into the charoset. And the idea is that while as bitter as things can get, we like to be optimistic and always see that there's always some sweetness along with the bitter. And this year is a year when I think we particularly can appreciate that. We are now on korech, which is Hillel sandwich, and this is going to be where I'm going to stop for today. Hillel's sandwich is one of those devices I told you. Remember, I mentioned mnemonic devices, things that help us remember how to do things. So Hillel had a practice of taking all three of the symbolic foods. Remember, we talked about how in the first Seder, the mitzvah is eat the Pesach sacrifice, eat matzah, and eat maror. So Hillel would put those all together. That's what the Hillel sandwich was. He would put a piece of that roast lamb. He would put some of the maror in there. And if you're putting maror is eaten with charoset. So charoset goes in, and that's made into a sandwich. So the trivia question you can ask at your Seder and see if you can stump people is, how is Hillel's sandwich different than the one that we eat here today? And the answer would be, in Hillel's time, there was still a temple standing. And so there was a Passover sacrifice, and there was actual lamb at the meal as part of the Passover celebration from that Passover sacrifice. So his Hillel sandwich had a piece of meat in it. Ours does not, because we no longer have a Passover sacrifice. That's where I'm wrapping things up today. I hope that you found a few new things here that you've learned that you didn't know before. Please share those with me today. 3 to 5 new things that you hadn't learned before or that you needed reminding of. All right. Thanks very much. Have a good day.